From bursting onto the scene as a lanky prospect to beating the #1 contender in the sport, it's easy to see why Sean O'Malley is such a tremendous star. But here's why his fellow fighters don't want to fight him. Well, firstly, we have the obvious reason. Sean O'Malley is without question one of the finest strikers in the sport. A dynamic, technical, and undeniably effective stand-up artist whose ability to mix things up makes him a very hard opponent to prepare for. Can you imagine how tough it would be to try and find sparring partners that could even come close to replicating Sugar Sean's game? Yeah, on the feet, the dude is a problem. And so far in his UFC career, those who have elected to stand with him have had some real trouble for the most part. And while his most recent bout did go to the distance, in general, O'Malley is among the more reliable knockout artists in the game. He catches opponents with straight punches, looping shots, head kicks, spinning attacks, and virtually anything he wants once he gets into his flow. And it's that unorthodox nature that really makes him a tough out. O'Malley has always trained his own way, never leaning too heavily on any of the traditions that he draws his skills from. You could watch a silhouette of O'Malley shadowboxing and have no doubt in your mind that it was him. And in the cage, this unorthodox approach makes it very hard to make reads in the fight, especially early on. And if there's one thing that O'Malley does very well, it's set the pace and rhythm of his fights early on. While you're figuring him out, trying to gauge his timing and footwork, he's already setting traps. And it makes him quite an interesting challenge, all things considered. But it's not just his work in the cage that makes him a threat. No, despite his relative lack of experience in the top levels, O'Malley is one of the biggest names in the sport. A man who attracts a different type of fan base entirely to all of his bouts. Not only has Sean marketed himself well within the fight game, but he has also reached another audience entirely through his YouTube channel, where he regularly streams gaming and talks about a wide range of topics. So you're not just taking on a major MMA star, oh no, you're getting in there with a guy who has proven crossover success. And he has some very passionate fans, that's for sure. And Sugar Sean's confidence has only been growing along with his star power. The dude was a pretty big hit long before he ever fought a top 10 opponent. In fact, his slow and methodical rise was actually something that helped him in a huge way. Not only did this slow rise allow O'Malley to work on his skills as a young fighter, but because of his rising star power, it allowed him to fight through his contract and negotiate a better one, before taking the type of risks that would come higher in the rankings. Some fans might see that as cowardice, but Sean O'Malley is a fighter who understands how to maneuver his brand. He will not be pressured by external forces that do not have his best interests at heart. Dana White is not your friend 99% of the time when you're on his roster. And you gotta admit, once O'Malley finally did make that massive jump up, taking on Jan, it really felt like the timing was perfect. But prior to facing and defeating Jan by a close decision, it's not like O'Malley's record was terrible. No, another reason he's regarded so highly was due to the performances he turned in. In spite of the weirdness that always followed his career, it's not like he was taking on world beaters straight away, sure. But when he did find himself on the favorable end of a mismatch, he always puts on a show for the fans. And if you're not on O'Malley's level, he is liable to totally embarrass you in there. One such fighter who learned just how much damage Sugar Sean can inflict is Thomas Almeida. Now, Almeida was known as a highly promising prospect at one point in time, but his chin started to become a serious issue for him. And by the time he took on O'Malley, he had lost 4 of his last 5, including 2 by way of finish. This fight had some pretty big stakes for Sean. It was his first bout since a major setback TKO against Marlon Vera, and it was clear that O'Malley would need to show up in a big way, taking advantage of the favorable matchup that stood before him. But despite having pretty commendable power, O'Malley didn't get Almeida out of there early as expected. No, this was a precise beatdown over 3 rounds, proof of Sugar Sean's ability to prolong his performance. Cardio, as it turned out, wasn't going to be an issue for this rising talent. We saw it again with his battering of Chris Moutinho. But despite Almeida's attempts to take advantage of the supposed weak point in O'Malley's armor, his legs, Sugar Sean was able to easily ward off all attempts to compromise him. By the time the third and final round came, O'Malley was in cruise control, but he never stopped looking for that finish. And when it did eventually come, man, it was a big shot. A hard left hand put Almeida on his back, signaling the end of both the bout and the Brazilian's UFC career. By this point, we were seeing Sean O'Malley ascend into this elite talent he is now, and his follow-up wins landed him a spot in the bantamweight top 15. So let's go back to O'Malley's unusual style of rising through the ranks. Most fighters are like hungry dogs chasing after a bone when they land in the UFC. They want to hit the fast track to fame and fortune. But for Sean O'Malley, the journey towards the top 5 was just as important, and as a young fighter with such huge potential both as an athlete and as a crossover star, O'Malley played the game perfectly, waiting for the opportune moment to eventually make his major climb. And it's not like the fans can really claim that O'Malley is scared to fight anyone, because the dude literally took a fight with the #1 ranked Peter Yan. And while the fight was close, he won. All of a sudden, maybe the single most talent-rich division in the sport had a new top contender. And despite being a big name with some real drawing power, it became harder to get O'Malley a fight. Sure, Henry Cejudo wanted the bout, but he'll fight anyone. There were talks of Marlon Vera eventually getting a rematch, but we all saw what Corey Sandhagen managed to do to him. And so in the end, after his win over Yan, O'Malley was forced to wait on the sidelines, watching as the title was contested between the champion Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo. In the end, the bout saw the champ retain his belt, and almost immediately afterwards, the UFC moved to set up the fight between the Funk Master and Sugar Sean. Aljo obviously wasn't happy about the UFC pushing this fight out as an announcement before he had even formally agreed, but hey, that's the game. And if we know Dana White, given that he had feuded with Sterling in the past, he's very clearly going to be hoping for an O'Malley win. If Sean can get the gold strap, then every fight in the division suddenly becomes open to him. Nobody's going to duck him if he has the belt. But for now, the Sugar Show will have to wait for his first official title bout to be fully confirmed. The dude is already a star, and his sniper-like precision-based style of fighting could well be a major problem for these bantamweight contenders, if he is in fact successful in claiming the belt. And don't forget that Sugar Sean is a big dude, and with that in mind, it does seem as though a move up to 145 pounds is an absolute inevitability. Can you imagine how good a fight between Sean O'Malley and Max Holloway would be? How about O'Malley versus Rodriguez? Do we even need to sell you on a bout with Volkanovski? Well, if there ever was a time when Sean O'Malley struggled to find the right fight, that time is very clearly drawing to a close. The man is right in the thick of the action now, and only time will tell just how successful he will be. From the long and drawn-out road he walked to get to the very top of the sport, to his emergence as the biggest star in the bantamweight division, it's easy to see why Sean O'Malley's opponents have some real fear about the prospect of facing him.